Welcome to another Still Speaks video. Hit that subscribe button and ring that bell and turn on all notifications so that you can be part of the hottest videos that this channel has to offer. And guys, thank you so much for waiting and being so patient with me for how long it took for this video to come out. And it's finally here. The 0K developer interview with GoogleFrog, part 2. And GoogleFrog, thank you so much for your patience with me and waiting so long for this video to come out. You are amazing. You've been very supportive and I appreciate you. Guys, video editing takes a long time and I had a lot of things going on in my life. So thank you guys so much for waiting for this. And thank you, GoogleFrog, for doing the same. You are amazing. You're a great guy. And hopefully everybody will enjoy what you have to say about 0K. So thank you so much for that. I want to say thank you to GoogleFrog for sending me replays so that I could cast for my channel and to use for this video, allowing me to use some of his YouTube video clips, allowing me to use some of his website assets for this particular video. Thank you, GoogleFrog. I want to say thank you to Shadow Fury 333 for allowing me to use some of his 0K videos. He is the top 0K caster right now. I want to say thank you for allowing me to use your videos to make this video even better. And then I want to say a big thank you to 64-Bit Dragon for sending me video clips from his YouTube channel for me to use in this video. Seriously guys, this video wouldn't be as good if I didn't have support from people like you. So thank you guys for that. I'm sure the fans are going to appreciate you and hopefully, you know what? Fans of 0K, subscribe to GoogleFrog, Shadow Fury 333, and 64-Bit Dragon. You will be very happy you did so. And I want to say, again, thank you guys for watching this video. I know it took a long time for it to come out, but you know what? I appreciate you for your patience. And without further ado, let's get on with the video. Thank you guys so much. So how many tech levels are there? Are there any big endgame units? And I think we've already answered that.
I can definitely add a bit to this.
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Yeah, so there's one tech level, as we've said, and there's these big endgame units from the Strider hub, which is what we've called it flat balance a decade ago, where you can build all the factories at once. The way we do tech is that the Striders and the heavier units aren't better than the smaller units. It's just they're probably better later in the game when stuff is high density. So you won't want a heavy unit at the start of the game unless you're doing some kind of rush into their base. But heavy units are by and large less efficient than smaller units. You know, a Strider that costs 3,000 will probably die to 3,000 cost in many other things. You know, not what it's good against, but many other armies. Because, you know, if it's on its own, there's nowhere left to retreat to, they can run it down and kill it. Striders really, and heavy units really get their value from being able to be repaired, which only costs energy, so it's quite efficient. It costs a bit of energy, but it's really good to repair things. That's what heavy tank's based around quite a bit. So we've got no tech levels, but we have a wide range of, you know, sizes. The cheapest unit is 25 metal, and the most expensive unit is the sort of Krogoth-like at 24,000 metal. So we've got it's a big range there, which I quite like. I like these games with big ranges. It's not so much that the battles get big, but you can have games where battles get big, but you're still doing them with like the same units. So most of the units in 0K cost somewhere between about like 150 and 400, and these are the mainline units, where most of the classes are. We've got heavier artillery, heavier tanks might be a bit heavier, and raiders and scouts are usually a bit like cheaper than 150. And this is where the bulk of the units are. A lot of the counter structure happens here. We've got quite a few units from like 500 to 2500. Every factory has one, and these are sort of like the capstone units of the factory. These would be Tech 2 in a game like TA. You've got your heavy tanks, your heavy artillery, your sort of weird stuff like the Juggernaut with gravity guns in the jump jet factory because it's got to be the jankiest unit. Heavy artilleries, assault type stuff, some weird stuff. And we call these the Demi Striders actually. They're sort of a stepping stone to Striders. Then, as we've talked about before, we've got the Strider hub, which has a bunch of units around about 5,000, or 3,000 to 5,000 cost. And then, of course, we go up to the bigger ones. And structures actually do the same thing. So structures are similar. We've got 4 non-positional energy structures. So, not like something you put on a particular spot to get a more efficient energy structure, like what are they called? Hydrocarbons in Spring Commander, I think.
Yes,
We've got geothermal generators, which you can upgrade. We've got 4 non-positional ones from like 35 metal windmills to 4,000 metal singularity reactors. Singularity reactors way more efficient, but you spent a lot of time building it, not getting any income. Whereas if you build 4,000 metal of wind generators, it's quite efficient. So if it takes you a while to build them, you probably should have built the wind generators. Later in the game, you escalate really by building these 4,000 metal things. There's some large maps where I've said, you're not really playing this map yet unless you have a fusion generator, which is 1,000 cost energy structure. So you can just deal with the economy that's everywhere. Finally, I guess on tech levels, there's the whole issue of construction UI. So what we've done is every constructor can build all the buildings all the time. And this makes the construction UI way simpler, which is I quite like. It was really good having every constructor have the same, list of things it can build, because you just, you don't have to worry about it anymore.
So you don't have to worry about like advanced construction K-bots or whatever building.
You don't have to have that thing in TA. I remember where you'd have the advanced K-bot with the other K-bots guarding it to go around and upgrade all the mexes.
Yeah. In that one, you had to like reclaim the original mechs and put the new mechs.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Oh man, I did not like that system. That was like you lost income to make more income, because yeah. Your system's pretty interesting here. So you have like really one tech level, but
the 1.5 in a sense.
Right, because like you have like a couple of really strong units in the factories. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's really neat because it gives you that like you don't really have to worry about teching up your factory. You just, as your economy comes in and you have enough mass or metal to build said giant unit. I mean, that's pretty neat. I like that.
It's sort of a soft mid-game strategy. Many factories will, want to use their iconic unit in the mid-game.
Yeah.
But you can also switch into other factories, especially in a free-for-all, where a free-for-all, you're like a giant, sprawling, massive base, which does everything, and essentially you might switch into a factory just to build 2 or 3 units from it, and probably the biggest unit, right?
So they could support each other, right? So your army could be more complete, if you will. So that's pretty rad. I dig that. I really dig that. So let's move forward and talk about terraforming. So how is terraforming handled? Could I build a fort in a match?
Yeah, so terraforming is terrain manipulation. Any constructor can do it. They put some resources into it, and the wall gets built, or the ditch gets built. You can build in pretty much any shape. The full powerful UI is, you select a command like level or raise or smooth, you drag an area, and then you can move it up or down. So you can do a lot with this, right? You can level to a height, you can raise the terrain sort of uniformly, you can make a ramp. A decent sized fort, like, with nice parapets and things, would probably set you back a few thousand metal and energy, but for a more efficient thing, you might build like a wall for things to hide behind. So I've been a fan of terraforming since I played Populous at the beginning. If you've played that, where the shaman stands there and builds a ramp and it just appears, or you can level a whole area. I've not seen it in many other games. I've seen it in, I think, Earth 2150 has it, but it sort of seemed to just be flattening areas. Not many other games have it, as I think it tends to be a bit too limited or janky or overpowered or fiddly for use in a fast competitive multiplayer game, because you've got this whole map. If you can do a lot of things to this terrain, there's so many things. How do you parameterize all that, right? So in a UI that people can use. On the technical side of things, it's very easy to change the terrain in Spring. You call a function, you put a bunch of values in an array, and the terrain goes. And this wasn't really anything extra for Spring to do, because Spring has, underneath the whole terraforming system, just a whole deformable terrain system. So, explosions make craters. You can find some maps get really hilly in, right? Somewhere where you would have been building vehicles can actually be really good for bots later, because it's just so hilly that vehicles slow down noticeably. So, and this all, the units repath, the terrain looks different, whatever technical under the hood happens. So all the devs had to do was basically make a Lua API for changing the height. So the tricky part of Terraform, though, which has been most of the last decade or before then, is refining the UI and mechanics to make it usable. So my aim is not just, here's a gimmick you can do. My aim is, here's a thing which you have time to do in a useful, powerful way in games, but that it isn't overpowered or feels unfair, which has taken a lot. We've really had to come at this from 2 ends, right? Back when I was talking about the 2 ends with the fight the enemy, not the game, you've got to make the game balanced at the same time as making the UI powerful enough to use the terraforming, right? You've got to make the terraforming usable by people, and then if they use it so much that it gets a bit annoying, you have to make the game balanced so that it's not annoying, so it's fine and good. It's pretty polished by now, I think. There's a bunch of configurable hotkeys, although with terraforming, we sort of go through cycles where I added a UI, 2 years later, I'm like, that UI is absolutely terrible. I'm going to try and remove it. Some people complain they liked it, and then I replace it with a new thing. I haven't done that in a while, but that did happen. I think we're pretty good now. There's a bunch of configurable hotkeys with good defaults, so you can do stuff like press a button, draw a line. Now that's going to be a wall, which your units can hide behind. Oh yeah, I didn't mention. The terrain in 0K is really, it's present, it's there. Projectiles don't go through it, which creates, without terraforming even, some interesting interactions around like cliffs or ramps where you can't see things over this ramp. So you can definitely make, I love doing this. You have someone who's built a giant death laser, which, fires direct fire. So you can make a little wall and put your units behind it, which sort of kicks the can down the road, right? You haven't dealt with the death laser, but you can at least survive for a bit until they build weapons that arc over it and kill you or go around it. So you can make these really nice little trench systems like this. And another thing I love about it is that terraforming doesn't belong to anyone once you make it. It's just there on the map. It's just terrain. They can overrun your position and then use your fortifications in a way that they can't do if they kill your turrets, right? There'll be these maps where people, bury construction towers called caretakers in little holes to reclaim nearby areas and repair nearby areas without being so exposed. And other people can come down, look in the hole, kill the thing and put their own thing there. So it's this great back and forth actually changing what the map's worth in a way. A bit like Reclaim does, where if there's a bunch of Reclaim somewhere, this part of the map becomes way more, useful. Yeah, I'm really quite proud of where terraforming is by now. I don't see it anywhere else, really, to such an extent. You see it in most team games, usually, doing something, maybe, burying some expensive power generator or putting up a little wall to defend from stuff. You sort of see it in 1v1s. It's, maybe a little bit too expensive to use absolutely everywhere in 1v1, but I think people should be using it more. The trouble with terraforming is you've got to, make the UI so good that people can actually take the time to do it, in a sense. But I have quite a bit of fun with it, and yeah, you can do a lot of stuff.
That sounds like a really huge task to balance, because you really could essentially break your game with terraforming. You could really just make a map, how you have walls in certain spot for a reason, and you could just break it down, right?
Well, so in one sense for terraforming breaking the game, I figure maps have terrain on them anyway. So so with terraforming, you can't make a really thin, cheap wall. There's a minimum distance you have to do. There's a minimum ramp size, stuff like that. So you can't just do super cheap things. So terraforming's reasonably expensive. You're not going to be destroying the entire map with terraforming. It costs quite a bit. You're going to be adding little features here and there. Maybe a ramp here, maybe a little wall here, a trench here, a hole to hide something in here. So you'll be adding features. You can, spend a few thousand metal. And if you want to make a giant fort against a bunch of AIs and have them, die in your battlements, you can certainly do that. But it isn't so expensive that it, destroys the whole map. And if the maps have terrain, you may as well make units not get broken by wacky terrain anyway. Yeah, so you can put ramps somewhere, you can break down walls, but often when you do that, if you want to do it cheaply, you'll be making choke points, right? Put a ramp somewhere, and unless you spend a lot on the whole ramp, and the enemy could shoot your constructors while you're doing this as well. If they have an undefended cliff and you really want to go up it with these units, well, if you put a ramp there, maps tend to have cliffs that are about the right height, so that's, a decent undertaking. It slows down the units to walk up it. Bots are much better at walking up ramps, of course, than vehicles, so there's that factor to take into account as well. And then when you get to the top of the ramp, well, you're in a choke point, bunched up in a ramp, maybe they'll just kill you.
So it's not so cheap where you could just spam it, but you have to really think about where you use it. Okay. I really dig that.
Yeah, it's really, really creative, right? You can do a lot of stuff with it.
How many commander types are there? What makes them different?
Each commander type is essentially a chassis which has a different selection of modules and base stats. You can select 4 at the start of a game, which is a bit like a faction selection, I guess. And there's also a chassis for the campaign with the whole pilot thing going on. So the 4 types. The Recon Commander has decent speed. It's got jump jets from the start of the game, which is really interesting. That's been that way since, I don't know, maybe at least a decade. It's quite interesting that this exists. It's relatively fragile and has a lower build rate than the average commander. But yeah, it's does some interesting things for 1v1. You can jump across cliffs and then go and expand somewhere. The Guardian Commander is tanky and relatively slow. It's got a lot of brute force style weaponries, has the most hit points, and can dual wield out of both of its arms. The strike commander is a bit similar to the guardian commander, but it's speedy and has innate regen rather than health. And it can also dual wield and has more of a focus on like finesse disabling style weapons like a electro stunner or a lightning rifle. And then finally, the engineer commander is also relatively slow and fragile, but it has the greatest build speed and build range. So it's really good for, turreting up somewhere. And it has access to all of the support modules. Other commanders have these, smattered throughout, like area shields or an area cloak or jammer, little personal drones that fight, and also has access to resurrecting wreckages, I believe. The difference between these commanders, so they're a bit like faction. They're sort of like a bit like what your strategy is going to be. But the difference between the commanders is not super massive at early levels. So we haven't had too much of a problem of counter relationships between chassis. The more common failure mode is for the meta to decide, oh yeah, this commander's probably what you want to do in 1v1. But there's a bit of flexibility in that. So I've seen lots of engineer and recon at the moment in the meta for 1v1. This is possibly because there was a unit that just got slightly better against commanders, or there's a factory that is slightly more common, which is slightly better against heavy units, so you don't want to have like a fighting commander so much. But this is all very sort of on the edge, tweak, niche stuff, and we tweak them slightly and try and make them about as good as each other.
What are the commander upgrades and what are they used for?
So basically, commander upgrades is you turn your commander from level 1 to level 2, level 2 to level 3, etc. They improve their stats a bit and they can give them new abilities and things. So the main part of each upgrade is when you do an upgrade, you get a list. You can select a few modules to put into your commander. So the level 1 to level 2 upgrades, you get to select a module and a weapon, I think, which replaces the starting sort of basic beam laser weapon. At level 3, you get to select 2 modules. And there's this list of modules. Some of them are sort of level locked to level 4 or 5, or have prerequisites, like for an area cloak, you need an area jammer. But essentially, you select to upgrade your commander, put the modules you want in. You can make presets on the website for this as well. And the commander drains metal and energy at some rate, and eventually it turns into the upgraded one. So it might have more speed, as in you might put a module in for more speed or damage or range, or give it the ability to cloak, give it a personal shield, like a bubble shield, a small one, give it jamming, give it resurrection, give it a sort of manual fire special weapon at level 4. At level 4, you get to add a second weapon. So the Guardian and Strike commanders get their dual wield of, just 2 weapons that you pick, whatever you pick. While Engineer and Recon only have 1 weapon because they're, not so battle-oriented. But they can also get like special fire weapons like a sniper shot or something. Most high-level commanders are seen in big team games because the cost sort of ramps up. Morphing for level 4, I think, happens a little bit in 1v1. But you often morph for level, because it's a bit expensive to get the extra weapon. We balance it so that the big power spike isn't really cheap. But morphing for the extra weapon, like to pick your weapon over the beam laser to get to level 2 or 3, is not that uncommon in 1v1. And people like to sometimes make a strategy around building this big commander that can do all these things.
So it's balanced around cost, and it also doesn't break the game when you get there. So I think that's really great. And you have to make choices. So depending on the game, correct?
Oh, yeah. You can choose which modules you're doing at the time. So it's not like a pre-built website thing where you do it at the start of the game. On the web, though, you can also rename your commanders, which is quite fun. So people have their own unique commander names and they put the skins on them if they've got the donation kudos.
Oh, so on the website, you could customize your commander and kind of pre-build it in a way?
A little bit, yeah. So it just pre-fills the module choices, really. Just, saving some clicks if you've got a thing you often do.
That makes sense. Okay. But you could also customize it if you donated some money. So that's something that people who like to customize their commander should listen to. If you want a custom hat, I give it a hat.
Yeah, give it a clan icon. Actually, for hats, there's this ancient code which I enjoy every time I remember it exists. If your computer thinks the date is December, it just draws a Santa hat on the commander.
All the time?
Yeah, like a small little Santa hat. It might be like on the ear of a commander, or like there's a commander with a small head which gets a small blue hat or something. This was added, maybe like 2009 or something, 2008, I don't know. And I just keep forgetting it exists. And then it gets to December, I'm like, hey, that exists still. The code's just stable. It doesn't crash I think it crashed the game once, but it just appears. And I'm like, this exists. Isn't that nice?
So in December, all the commanders get hats?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's... I like that. I'm going to have to check that out when December hits for sure. Well, thank you for that. That's really cool. All right. So Does the match end when the commander dies?
Yeah, mostly no. Been an option for a long time, but I haven't seen it for a while. We removed it as the default probably over a decade ago because we couldn't really see a good use case with like how commanders were balanced. So this isn't to say that people don't lose the match if their commander dies. People still lose by losing their commander sometimes because it's early in the game and they can't take the loss of map presence and innate income that the commander provides, or because they've upgraded their commander so much, invested so much into it that it's a significant part of their power. So there's not a hard system of you lose if your commander dies, but there's innate income on the commander, which means that you probably lose if you lose it early. The thing with the losing commanders is a bit like a catch-22. So if the game hard ends when the commander dies, then there's these two cases you can find yourself in, which are a bit paradoxical. So if your commander isn't important enough for you to miss it so much that you lose the game anyway if it dies, right? So if the commander dies and you don't lose the game automatically, but you don't really miss it that much if it dies because your economy is big enough that the innate income loss, hurts but isn't everything, and you haven't upgraded it so much that it's most of your army, then if you would lose if it dies, right, if it's an automatic assassination victory, then you sort of may as well cloak it in the corner, maybe in a terraform fort, in a hole in the side of your base, and forget about it. And yeah, people would just sort of learn when to bring their commanders off the front line, hide them in the corner of the base, and forget about them, which seems a bit boring. But if on the other hand, your commander is so important, you've upgraded it, or it's early in the game, that you essentially lose when it dies, even if you don't lose immediately to an assassination victory, then you're going to be using it on the front line anyway, because you have to, because it's important, right? So you're not going to be hiding it away. So we've got this situation where, okay, if you lose it and that causes a loss eventually anyway, then assassination victory is a bit redundant. But if you lose it and you don't necessarily lose on like this situation, then assassination victory just means you wouldn't have used it out on the front. So we sort of prefer this sort of soft assassination style thing where people are not forced to hide their commander if it's like a late game deadly situation. They can still use their commander on the front doing whatever, which seems fun, I think. It's more fun to have more units going around doing stuff. And we don't require them to hide it. So in the mid game, you've got this sort of situation where people think, do I go for that commander snipe? It's a force on the front line. They'd lose income from it. But they're weighing up whether it's sort of worth the cost of doing that, not weighing up whether they, can do it and end the game. Of course, they're doing that as well often. It sort of comes out of the relative power of our commanders. If you have a commander pushing a front, you don't necessarily have to have your own commander to counter it. It can be countered by, constructors building defenses maybe, or some skirmishers which outrange commanders. So we don't need assassination so much because there's no damage bonuses. We can't really make commanders good against, anti-heavy units that are good at assassinating stuff. So we wouldn't be able to solve some of those issues if we had assassination, I think. I don't really miss assassination. Maybe it would be good for finishing a few games a bit earlier. But I think the cool stuff and the cool sort of really scrappy situations where two people are down to like one constructor and they're trying to build up an energy generator so they can afford a turret or something is really cool as well. You don't hard lose if it dies, but you probably do if it's the early game.
Well, that's a very interesting take on it, and I think it's handled pretty well there. I dig that. So thanks for explaining that. How is multiplayer handled? Is there a server or is it peer-to-peer?
Yeah, I guess this is a bit of a weird question. It's like, in some sense, the players don't really have to care about the underlying technical details as long as it all works. It's like people clamoring for multi-threaded in a bunch of things when the game sometimes, whatever it is, doesn't make sense to multi-thread. Like Spring has multi-threading in it doing some things, but not others. So it's a bit like judge the output rather than the technical document. Yes, it's sort of depending on how technical you want to get. Multiplayer is always a client server. For the multiplayer like battles on our server, the clients are the people on the server is the auto hosts hosted on our infrastructure. But there is a caveat because when you play the campaign, the campaign you can play it co-op, so you control the same stuff and basically have a bunch of friends microing everything or doing whatever. So when you play the co-op campaign, the way we did that is you invite people through Steam, and then all of the messy sort of networking stuff is abstracted through the Steam client, which means unfortunately we can't do it for the standalone, but you do it through Steam, and then Steam abstracts it somehow, and the person who we did the inviting is then the host of the game. So it doesn't use our server infrastructure at all. So that's sort of, what you mean by peer-to-peer sometimes. If you're on a LAN situation, you'll have LAN level of latency using this system. When you play the co-op campaign, if you're in the same country, it might be better than going to our servers in, I think, Canada at the moment. I guess I forgot to mention that there's a co-op campaign, which is the normal campaign. You could just invite people and play co-op.
Okay, so there's a co-op campaign, and that's good to know, definitely. And So the server, the multiplayer is handled both peer-to-peer and do you have a server?
Yeah, the server's in Canada, and that's the multiplayer is all client server.
Okay, so it's a client server. All right, great. Well, thank you for answering that. Is there ranked matches?
yeah, I think I mentioned this, but to go into a bit more detail, yeah, we've got an active 1v1 matchmaking ladder with rating limits on who you can play with so that people play the ladder and don't get absolutely stomped and don't sort of waste their time a bit. We've experimented with a bit actually. So you can go into a wider rating mode, which can search against people to make more uneven games if you just want to really train or do whatever. We've also actually, interestingly, I've experimented with this handicap mode, which says, okay, you search and you find someone who's outside your range, but to make it sort of fun for everyone, we say this is not a ranked match anymore. The lower level player gets a resource boost, which is like a fun extra thing you can tick if you just want to maybe, you want to search for the ladder, but you also don't care if you play wider people and want to have a bit of a more even game. That's sort of a minor thing. We've got, lots of people playing the, basic search for a 1v1, which is fair, and you play a game and the ladder ratings update. In terms of activity, I think the ladders hide people. You don't disappear from the ladder, but they get hidden from the list if you aren't in a game for 2 weeks. So that's a good guide. I think there's usually a few hundred players knocking around within that time frame. People say it's really relatively easy to get a match, provided it isn't the time of day when the USA is asleep and EU's at work. So we've got I think most of our play base is EU, which seems to be a thing for a lot of RTS actually. But yeah, the USA time's okay too. And as long as you're not in that 8th or so of the day, 5th of the day, where the time zones don't line up, then matchmaking's pretty good. We've got systems to do this. So there's a little area of the lobby which says, if there's someone who's trying to search for a game and they're in your range, you could just click this button and you'll be playing on 1v1. And so often you'll get, someone searches, somebody else goes, oh yeah, whatever, I'll play, and then they click it. So yeah, you've got these little systems and opting for wider search ranges as well. So yeah, these are ranked games. There's also these sort of overlapping communities of people who play in auto hosts. So you'll often have in the, in the good time zones, not this sort of EU-US sleeping time, you'll have these 16v16 or 10v10 or whatever team games, which you can just sort of hop into. There'll be one going and you can spectate the end of the last one and then play the next one. And also I've seen a pick up in free-for-all and co-op play recently as well. So people will play these, 1 or 2 hour free-for-alls where they're just controlling massive bases and doing all this diplomacy and stuff, which is pretty cool too.
You got a lot going on there. Sounds like you got handled pretty well. So cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. How many maps are there in 0K?
Somewhere probably around about 200-ish. There are 70 maps for the campaign, which, taken from multiplayer, a lot of them. And then we've got extra featured maps on top of that. So there's 200-ish featured maps. The way this works is that there's a full pool of maps on the Spring infrastructure, and I think hosted on our infrastructure a little bit as well, of all the maps that everyone's made for Spring over the last 15 years. So there's thousands, probably tens of thousands, but a lot of them will be people testing stuff out and making a map in Paint or something. So we've featured about 200 maps at the moment, I think, which, the popular ones that look decent-ish at least. And this is really a result of basically the Spring community with a bunch of mappers just making maps, and all the games could use them. And yeah, it's like a big history of maps, which is quite good because mappers will experiment and then popular ones will be featured and then they'll get graphical reworks by people years down the line. The people in Bar are actually reworking quite a few old maps right now and doing some really good work with that. The 1v1 matchmaker, I guess, to finish things off, takes from a pool of about, the 1v1 matchmaker often has about 20 maps in it, and we rotate between about 30-ish. People have been making new 1v1 maps in recent years too, to eke out the pool and to experiment with new types of games. So yeah, quite a few maps. The vast majority of them are sort of nonsense, but that leaves over about 200, which, pretty good.
So you have a solid 200 good maps, at least.
Yeah. We've got the AutoSo system has this sort of map voting / ranking system where the game ends in the big battle room or a small team game room or whatever, and then there's these 4 choices and people can vote for which map. So we don't have this thing where the game gets sort of stuck in a particular map. Is it Seton's Clutch they play in
Clutch.
Yeah,
all day long.
Yeah, so we've got a good map rotation system for the battle for the auto hosts as well. It'll prompt you for some maps. You might pick people vote for them. They'll play that map. There's a bit of a popularity weighting there as well,
so
giving some out there maps. Yeah.
So it gives you some variety and people get to vote on them. So I think that's a really good system, especially for the auto pop. That's cool.
Yep.
Is there a map maker? Do you guys have a map editor or anything like that?
Not in the sense that you can open up StarCraft and click around and make a map in one program. It's not really my area of expertise. I've made one map, which is a random map based on, it's got a bunch of Voronoi cells and different height maps, and then you sort of make cliffs and things and ramps and randomly allocate where the resources are with a bit of an eye towards symmetry and keeping things nice with some theories about how maps should work. But I didn't even make the underlying map for that because I don't know how to do it. So plenty of people make maps. There's an in-engine map maker called Springboard, which has been worked on by Gajop, one guy who also did a lot of lobby stuff, and a few other projects, which does a lot. I'm told it doesn't quite do everything. And have been trying to get Gajop to, package it as one standalone thing, which can do everything. But apparently there's, he probably doesn't have the time. He's, people work on whatever they have time for, and doing the final bit of polish probably isn't all that interesting, and there might be barriers. But map making can be very flexible. So maps are basically a collection of images. There's an image which is a grayscale image for what the height map is. There's a bunch of texture images for ambient or diffuse or more words that I'm not really a graphics programmer about. People can make shiny maps with reflections and do specular stuff, and apparently Splat Maps is a word I've heard as well. So there's a bunch of images for texture and whatever it looks like and how shiny it is. There's a height map for the grayscale image, and then I think there's also a metal map for where metal spots are, which we have deprecated with the metal spot system. And sometimes I think maps have feature maps, but maybe that might have been replaced by a different system. I'm not sure. But essentially, you can chuck anything you want to into a map. The sky's the limit with maps. I've actually been talking in the RTS community with other people sometimes about their maps. And apparently, for StarCraft 2, you have to pick particular tile sets, and you only have a certain number of splats or something. This is outside my area of expertise, but the Spring maps are basically, you can do anything you want, but that means that you have to do everything you want. I've heard of maps being made in GIMP or Blender. So you make it in Blender, and then you render it orthogonally top down with a grayscale rendering, and that gives you the height map, right? And there are some maps I've seen ages ago, which in the unfeatured map pool somewhere, which are clearly someone drawing around in paint to make a height map and then filling it in or whatever. So yeah, the sky's the limit on map making. The people in Bar are making their maps in World Machine, which map makers might know what that is, and the results are really impressive there. So it's got erosion and things and whatever. So yeah, there's not a map maker, there's a map workflow. We've got wiki articles about some workflows you can do as well.
So you have articles telling people how to do this?
Yeah, there's wiki pages. We've got a wiki manual for all the units and everything, and this has got development stuff on it too.
It's really cool. All right, so you don't have a map editor, but they are relatively easy ways to do it. I mean, they may not be super easy, but they're doable for people who want to learn.
Yeah, someone made a video, I think Anarkin made this video, of how to make a map in Springboard in 1 hour or something, which won't be the prettiest map, but you can definitely make any terrain and you want it and get it out there and test it.
It's pretty neat. In 1 hour. Hey, it may not be pretty, but at least you made a map. You did something. But anyhow, that's cool. That's really great. Is there a replay system?
Yes. So local replays for everything you do are saved locally, and they're quite small because they just save commands. Games on the multiplayer server automatically make a battle thread, which is like a forum thread. There's who played, what the map was. You can click a spoiler button to see who won. And then there's a thread below, which is integrated with the, the whole forum system. And, there's a watch now button. So you've got the lobby open, you've got the website open. You click watch now and the replay downloads and you play it. So it's all very, integrated and pretty polished. This question actually would have surprised me a few years ago because I thought, RTS has got to have a replay system. More recent indie RTS launches with trying to make RTS in really generic game engines, which don't just have replays automatically. It made me go, oh yeah, replays are actually sort of a hard task, and you've got to actually work to get them a bit. Although on the engine, given Spring, I actually wouldn't be surprised if it had a replay system before it could run any games, because it was originally supposed to be just a way of viewing Total Annihilation replays in 3D. So it probably had this whole system, or possibly had this system before you could actually make any games with it, which is interesting.
Yeah. That is interesting. Well, thank you for letting us know about it. Who are the notable casters of 0K?
Well, I guess the most notable is Shadow Fury 333, who goes by Dominic now. I think I met him through Acron around 2010, the time travel RTS, and he's probably been casting 0K for about that long. He started off in Acron, I think. He's a bit of a general caster. Sometimes he branches out. I think he was considering Gare Goo for a while and also has done some Battle Right casting, and he's really into fighting games as well. He actually, I'm branching out. I think he cast an Immortal tournament recently. So, Immortal Gates of Pyre, the StarCraft 2 modder game, which is becoming a game now rather than a mod. So yeah, he did a bit of that recently. He can actually be heard casting a 1v1 on the main trailer on the Steam page, and he says boy, buoy.
What?
There's a unit called boy, which is an AF unit that floats up.
Yeah.
It floats and then fires a weapon on the sea surface.
Okay. And he calls
so
it
I've learned how to pronounce some words.
Oh yeah, it's buoy.
Well, I call it boy.
Boy, okay. I think it's actually...
Maybe you're American too.
Yeah. In America...
Well, actually, he's Canadian.
In America, we call it buoy.
Yeah. So we've had
Okay.
some pronunciations there. That's good.
Well,
Other
you're-
notable casters.
Yeah.
One of the florists. There's a few florists in the Spring community. It really confuses me. Did some casting, but I think Shadow Fury is the one who's been around the most and gone the distance. Shadow Fury 333.
Shadow.
Some places he's Dominic now.
Okay, so Shadow Fury 333 on YouTube and Dominic Casts, or is it something like that on? I'm at
I think it's Dominic Cast. Yeah.
on Twitch. I think that's it. So yeah, if you guys want to check him out, look him up. I might even link him down below. Does 0K have a website? Any social media?
Yeah, so the website's 0k.info, and it has the things you'd expect from a website, I guess. Well, actually, it's more of a player website than a sort of public-facing marketing website. So it's got a splash page and things, but it's not like, here's the news to draw you in. So it's got searchable maps, replays, mods. You can upload maps and mods on it. Well, replays, of course, are automatically generated. They have their own threads. It's where we've run Planet Wars, so everything's sort of integrated with player profiles and things. It's got a custom forum where the replays generate their own threads. Custom forums are sort of double-edged sword, maybe, because it means we've got this sort of great forum. We can do exactly what we want on it. But it also means we're outside of like the Reddit or wherever else infrastructure, which is it's good for having control and the whole thing being open source and we know it's not going to disappear. But it's sort of bad for not having these network effects where you could spread throughout Reddit. Because we have a Reddit subreddit. I think it's mostly pretty empty because the forum just sort of works better for what we want to do. We sort of barely have social media. So I guess, is Discord social media? We have quite a bit of Discord. Discord is much nicer. I like Discord because you talk to people directly and you're not like broadcasting stuff and screaming into the void so much. So yeah, we've got quite a bit of Discord. The in-game multiplayer lobby chat channels integrated with Discord in that messages pass between them and you could talk to people that way. So yeah, quite a bit of Discord stuff. Apart from that, sort of not much. I tried running the Twitter account briefly. So there is a Twitter account, but I wasn't all that interested in it. Basically, it felt like a bunch of hyped indie game devs and big companies sort of screaming at each other for everyone else to try and get their things.
Okay.
There is a Facebook which might be run by someone still, I'm not sure. Yeah, sort of the fact of the matter is that nobody in the project really has much of an aptitude or interest in doing like marketing, social media type things. I think I try to be too like precise and detailed and say things how they are rather than like trying to overhype things, right? I think for social media, you might have to be really hyped all the time or something. Although, this is the kind of thing where if anyone's interested in picking up marketing, they can do it. It would be appreciated. That's sort of how the project works. If people are interested in something and think it needs doing, they can do it. That's how everything's been built. It'd be also good to have someone to make like a flashy modern web UI or web splash page too.
Okay.
So yeah, a little bit of social media, but that's about it.
So putting it out there, everyone, if you guys want to pick up the social media manager role, maybe you could email or Discord GoogleFrog, and maybe that might become a reality. You might even become a web creator for 0K. I don't know. Maybe you need to talk to this guy and see if you can make that happen. But if you guys are really interested in following 0K, it's their website or the Discord, correct?
Yeah, or there's an email as well. I think the email is through the contact link on the website. I was looking at Sanctuary, which you're aware of.
Yeah.
Sanctuary has like, it will say it's hiring people, but it's like hiring hobbyists. I thought, hang on, you can do that? You can actually just write on your website we're hiring people, but then say you'll be a hobbyist?
Yeah,
It's interesting.
That's what it looks like.
I thought, yeah, interesting.
Put it out there. You never know.
Yeah.
It's always a no if you don't ask for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'll pretty much do things and then announce them and when they're done, essentially, sort of anti-hype that way.
If you need help, ask people. Just put it out there and say, yo, we need somebody to run our social media. Help us out. And I'm sure someone would love to do it because you do have a community and you do have people that like 0K a whole lot. So here's hoping, right?
Yeah, it could be good.
So it could be good. Is the game still being balanced and updated? And if so, how often?
Yeah, I try to make a patch every month or so, sort of linking in with our versioning system, which if you've been around for a bit, you probably know that the version is like 1. It's always a 1. Here's the secret of the versioning. It's a 1, then it's a point, then it's a day since year 0, which we're up to 0.9 so far. So year 0 is when we decided upon this versioning system. So that's probably like 2012. It'll be a bit ugly when we go to a 10 actually next year. Maybe we'll change it. Then it's point month. So the current version is 1.9.8 because I released a version patch last weekend. Then point increment this when you make something the same when the other 3 are the same. So the point is like how broken the release was and how much I needed to fix it. Yeah, so that's the secret of the versioning, and it sort of motivates me to make a patch every month or so. They include whatever's going on at the time, usually, like some contributions by people, although I really have to have the time to do that, so it's being a bit of a bottleneck there. There'll be random fixes for bugs that have come in, small little tweaks, probably a UI improvement or two, sort of whatever people have been doing, whatever is being contributed, whatever I feel like, yeah, I should, I got the motivation to do this over a weekend now, so I'm going to do it. The balance is pretty tight by now, so still, tweaking it in terms of feedback, especially because, people's playstyle changes, the meta evolves, new things are discovered. They tend to happen every 1, 2, or 3 months, depending on, how much attention I've been able to pay to what's happening in 1v1s. Usually the way balance works is it will flow from 1v1 to team games, because if you get 1v1 right, then whatever happens in teams is probably right. Although then sometimes you've got to make some, changes to super weapons or big stuff to accommodate teams and free-for-all as well, which is good. Yeah, sometimes there are larger tweaks or reworks, probably every year or so at this point. So the most recent sort of big thing, which you probably wouldn't call big, is we made one of the defensive turrets, which was pretty good against raiders, quite a bit worse against things that weren't raiders, and also a little bit worse against raiders, which has changed the game a bit, but not much. The most recent patch actually increased the metal income by 1 you have on commanders, which I expect to have a big effect on how the game plays at the start. The biggest thing was probably about 2 years ago, which we called, or 1.5 years ago, that we called Superfluid, which was where we made the raider battles a bit less swingy and unforgiving, which was some feedback we got from people coming from other games since the Steam release, that the raider battles felt a bit weird, how you could have mirror matches that were really sort of micro-dependent, like really, really micro-dependent, to the point where experienced players could absolutely destroy other things. So yeah, we still pay attention and make some changes and fixes and updates and things.
Do players help balance the game? And how does the development team hear their feedback?
Yeah, they mostly help in the sense that fundamental goal is to make a fun game, so the only way to know what is fun is to hear what people are saying about it. With feedback, especially deeper feedback, there's a lot of conflicting feedback at times, where some people say, oh, this is fine, other people say, this is not fine. And of course, the people who are saying it's not fine are probably going to be yelling louder, so it's very tricky to weave that balance. We mostly hear it through the lobby and Discord and forums and things. So the whole battle replay system means that you can have a battle and think, oh, this was broken. Then you post on the bottom of it, and I'll probably be watching that game to see see what's happening in that game. So players can do that. There's an online stats tool, which is external to our infrastructure. A player called SNA made it by downloading replays and seeing what happens in the games, which is really good. It makes a matchup grid for all 11 factories, which you can filter per map and skill level and patch and whatever. So that's been really useful for just seeing what might be on the horizon. You can't balance by stats, but you can see where the player feedback might be exaggerating or might be actually forgetting about something, and maybe that needs a bit of tweak. Yeah, but on how does the development team hear their feedback? So, forums, etc. But also, as I said, there's really a development team in the usual sense. Everyone in the community exists somewhere between player and developer. So a lot of help comes in the form of them being developers. Often on these forum threads, which can cause a bit of trouble sometimes, you'll have the feedback, and then you'll have people analyzing the feedback, thinking what is causing this feedback, what's the underlying problem in the design that might need to be tweaked or adjusted or something. Or, you can get these in balancing a game, you can get these long chains of things. People at the moment think this light turret might be actually a bit too common, but that might be because the commander, which is the engineer commander, is pretty good at the moment. And that might be because a unit which is quite good against heavy units, and thus commanders, is pretty good, discouraging people from getting heavy commanders. And that might be because of a buff to a different unit in that unit's factory, right? So feedback, balance is very hard to untangle, at least at the point where we are. There are very rarely any obvious, oh yeah, this is way too good, this is way not too good. It's quite honed in by this point. Actually, something where I've played it a lot is the detriment. So the 24,000 metal giant endgame Strider. People are saying, this unit's no good. It's not that interesting to use. Just walks there slowly and then shoots stuff and probably blows up. So there was a thread about this, and what came out of the thread is it gained jump jets. So actually, there's a whole update with a picture of this. It hunkers down and then launches off like a rocket, a decent way, a sort of a tactical distance, like a long tactical distance, not a giant strategic distance. And then it lands somewhere, and there's an explosion where it lands and everything dies. And this came out of a lot of feedback and discussion in the forums by the players, but also people, proposing things. And then one player made an implementation of this with the whole rocket effect and the whole jump happening, and submitted a pull request, which is, a request for the repository to pull his code into the main game. And so then there was a pull request. I had a bit of technical back and forth with, how it's implemented, tweaked it a bit and polished some things, changed, balanced it a little bit with the numbers, and now it's in the game. So that's really what open source means. Anyone can get the source and mess around with things, and then if it works and fulfills some goal, which they have, and seems maintainable as well, because that's a big problem. Whether you can maintain the code base, it will probably end up in the game. So that's the big end state for how players help balance the game.
So anyone could work on anything and request for it to be in the game?
Yeah, it's better to have some technical stuff behind it and back it up with the kinds of things developers, designers would think about.
Right.
What's balanced, what's needed. If you make a pull request, which is this unit, I think, which is too good, I've pull requested it so its health is now lower. Well, I go, that's a one-line change of a number in a text file. There isn't really much technical work put into this pull request. It has to have the backing of the thinking behind it. The thinking, a lot of balance is thinking about it and considering a lot of things. So in many cases, a lot more of the work is thinking about the change and then testing it out in in the sandbox, testing it out in some 1v1s on the test servers and not test servers, but you can host any version on these auto hosts. And so you can host these things. So a lot of the work is in the thinking about it and making a concrete change and then testing it out. There's actually a lot of modding tools to help with that. I made a tool which lets you essentially change the stats of any unit just by putting a string into a text box in the advanced options in the battle lobby. So you can say, okay, what if this turret had 20% less health? I will just make a little bit of code, which is a string, put it into here, and now no one has to download a mod or anything. We can just test it out. So they can help that way too.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's really great. Are there any big updates planned for 0K?
Well, not specifically. I'm a bit busy at the moment. It show's quite busy, so that's a bit of a problem there. It depends on who has time and what they want to do. If someone wants to come along and have a lot of time and motivation and do some really good communication, then a lot of things could happen. There's a bit of an idea to make the module system for commanders, improve it a bit, make it more interesting, but that takes a lot of work to think about that and implement it. So if someone wants to pick that up, they could. There's Planet Wars, of course, would be great to happen. Planet Wars has fallen off since we've been busier. But if someone with C# knowledge wants to come in and make the server changes to tweak the latest Planet Wars, because whenever we run Planet Wars, we go, well, this was okay. This was a decent, it was fun for now, but would it be sustainable? Would people keep playing it, or is it sort of hurting people in the long run? So we have to, we redesign it a bit and tweak it. So I've redesigned, tweaked the design of Planet Wars, but now we've got to have someone to come along and do the C# on the server and get all that building and really go through it. If someone really knowledgeable of that comes in, then we'd love to run Planet Wars, which would be a big thing. We're also surely going to adopt the engine updates that are happening over in BAR, in Beyond All Reason at some point, because they're working on that. It's not, their development is a different stage than ours. Their development's more in the experimental. We can push, and every update they push goes right to the players, right? They don't have stable releases, which they work on. As far as, well, at least they didn't recently, they might have now. So their development is really, we can, push the engine, we can add these graphical things, we can speed it up a bit. And if it breaks, well, we'll have to then work on why it breaks, but we've got the developers to do that. So when that gets a bit stabler, I'm really looking to move to that to improve the graphics and performance, which would be a big update, which will hopefully happen. I guess personally, I hope to make my random map generator so I feel it's good enough to put it in the matchmaker, which would be good. But yeah, big updates. It's basically what people do. We have a lot of factories already, but if someone came in and really wanted to make a factory and seemed to have it's a niche and it made sense in the game, I'm sure they could if they really put the work in. But nothing specific. It depends on motivation and time.
So it sounds like you got a lot of big plans in the future.
Yeah, if there's capacity to do them.
It looks like you guys are hoping that other people will join in and help you with your planetary, what was that again? The planetary ranking system? The
Planet Wars.
Planet Wars.
So what Planet Wars is, there's been 20 iterations so far, starting back in 2008, maybe 7. Probably 8. Yeah, there'd be an auto host, or later it wasn't quite an auto host, or it would be a matchmaker, not an auto host, but there'd be an auto host where the map is set, people are based on their metagame faction are put on the 2 teams, and there's a website where people can decide what to attack, which planet to do the battle on, what to fight, where to fight, build defenses on the planets, build energy structures. So it was really cool, like Civilization, or what do you call it, 4X space games, like Master of Orion-ish type stuff, where you build an upgrade on a planet and it makes some energy, or it makes some dropships or whatever it is that you make in the metagame. And then in the battle, you're fighting in these maps, but these maps have these structures on them which don't do anything in the game. Well, they do a little bit sometimes. They don't do much on the game. But if the enemy destroys those in the battle, or whoever destroys those, maybe you nuke your own structure because of tactics, those structures then get destroyed and are disabled for some hours in the metagame. And also whoever wins that game changes who has vying for control for each planet. So, we've iterated on that a bit, added to it. The last ran one, I think just before Steam, so 3 years ago. And we've sort of found, this is okay for a smallish kind of thing. But there was really a motivation for the top players to be online all the time, and the lower skill players weren't really all that needed. So I've got a design in the works that should solve that problem. I've got a design, written down in a document that should solve that problem, but it really takes a bit of infrastructure development to get it there and to run it again.
So, well, hopefully you find somebody, or you find the time to make that happen, because that sounds fun. I think your fan base would love that and would also attract new people. So hopefully you get that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds really cool. All right. So, I think we've really talked a whole lot about 0K and really covered a lot of things here. So is there anything else you would like to add?
No, not really. I agree. This was a lot. We've gone through a lot. It was really quite thorough. I guess I'd say that people should check out 0K. Post-Steam release, actually, the only profit value we were comparing was estimating how much work had gone into the game compared to how many people spend time enjoying it. So, if you've put in less work than all these, thousands of players are spending time enjoying the game, then you sort of made a time profit, right? So we're, trying to boost that profit in that respect. Yeah. Well, thanks for the interview.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get involved with 0K, it is absolutely free on Steam. So type in 0K and search for it, download it, and get involved. You can also be part of the balancing patches on the website, which is, what is that again? 0-k.info?
Yeah, 0-k.info.
Okay. And they're also
it's very searchable.
It's very searchable. So you could also Google it, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And there's also their Discord, which they are very active on. So definitely get involved in those things. And maybe you could even help them out with some of the things they need help with. Definitely talk to GoogleFrog, this gentleman right here, GoogleFrog, about that if you want to get involved. So is there any last things you'd like to say, GoogleFrog, before we sign off?
Thanks for the interview again. It's been really interesting. Good to talk through all this.
Yeah, it's been a real, I think this is a 2+ hour long video, but thank you for sitting through it and being willing to talk about it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you guys so much for considering 0K. Definitely check it out. It is definitely worth your time. So guys, like this video, subscribe to my channel, favorite it because that helps me out, and send your good replays to stillspeaks@gmail.com. And share with your friends, family, and foes because you need something interesting to watch as well. And as always, everyone, GG.